Hi, I'm Lisa Dunn, Head of Special Collections and Archives at the Colorado School of Mines Library. This is Mining History and Images, the Colorado Mining Association and Gilman Digital Photos Projects Part 2, Gilman Images. So I will be going over some of the photographs from the Gilman New Jersey Zinc Company photos collection in this part 2. And while I'm doing that, we'll be talking about creating digital archives and improving accessibility and preservation. This talk was originally given to the Denver Mining Club, and this is me on the right, sans mask. So when we talked about our digital projects in part 1, I mentioned historical research. So historical research on a budget is what we do, and we don't have a lot of staff resources. We don't get really deeply into historical research on mine sites or mine districts. We just don't have the resources, but what we can do are some things that every archive could probably do. We examine the collection that comes in. We identify locations in the collection. We identify dates where available, and both proper names and, for example, mine names or mining district names, town names, any sort of proper names that we can find. We look for groupings. We look to see if there are groups of photos that we can put together in some way. We look for boundaries. For example, what is the date range of this collection? Is it focused on one particular mining district, or is it running through the county or even the state? And we look for related collections. Some of the resources we have related collections at other archives in the U.S. And context is cumulative. Any context we get is added onto what we already have. It's always helpful if someone else has already done some of the work for our collections. We confirm facts, and in particular, we look for authoritative publications when the facts really matter, when we really have to know the location, when we really need to know the name of the mine. We focus on authoritative, either scholarly or official publications where possible. So for Gilman, these sources included the Library of Congress images and Google Images collections. It included some scholarly works, mining engineering reference books, particularly for identifying or confirming the identification of equipment and machinery. And then if there's time, and if we needed to go in that direction, browsing through the popular histories on Gilman and Red Cliff in Colorado, and specifically to tie down some dates, we might look at newspaper accounts. So just some example of some of the things that we found looking through our resources and doing historical research. This is a Library of Congress photo for 2016 of this is what's left of the town of Gilman on its plateau in 2016. And here are a couple of authoritative publications that I used. The one on the right from Economic Geology Monograph number 7, 1990, which was very helpful in determining the locations of the mines in relationship to each other and to the Eagle River, and the connections of the mines and the location of the Newhouse Tunnel. There was a remediation map that was published in the Vail Daily in 2019. While not necessarily considered an authoritative publication, they used authoritative sources to compile it. So when I needed to know the location of the tailings piles and the wooden trestle leading to them, this was a good map to have. So my research allowed me to construct a rough timeline of the Gilman district and what was going on there. And some photos actually had dates. They had the year the photo was taken, but many of them did not. And this gave me the opportunity to create date ranges. Like this photograph could have been taken between this date and this date. And when I wasn't sure, I could even make possible dates that I was thinking it was, for example, between 1910 and 1930. And that gives us a little more information. It's always possible to narrow these down further, but this gives us a good starting point. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was metadata for the collection. So I can use my historical research to make our metadata more relevant and more accurate. For example, many of the photos did not contain a date, but I just talked about how I could use date ranges based on some of the things I found in the photos in my timeline. We usually create a short title and then a brief description of the contents of the photo. And if we can identify the person, we include the name of the creator or the photographer. We also include subject headings that will help people both discover and identify different parts of the photograph, and of course geographic subject headings that let you know where the photograph was taken more specifically, or as specific as we can be. And then other stuff. Sometimes there may be captions that might be included in the photo. There might be materials that have been paper clipped or taped or glued to the photograph, and that's where we include things like that. So let's talk about Gilman's Photos Stories. These are the photographs from the New Jersey Zinc Company's archives, a part of their archives, and these were donated courtesy of the Friends of Mineralogy Colorado chapter, who also contributed significantly to the descriptive information and the context that we use to create our metadata. There are about 175 images focused on the 1890s all the way up to 1948, and they depict mining activities in the area of Gilman, Colorado. That makes this collection historically significant, particularly for recording life, the growth of the towns in the Gilman mining district, and life in the mines and life in the town. These photos we made available digitally in October 2020, so just recently. So what they do is they tell that story of mining in the Gilman Red Cliff mining district, and that's an important story. So let's look at some of my favorites from the Gilman Mining Collection, and I have a lot of favorites from this collection. These are two pictures of the Iron Mask mine and mine buildings. The first photo on the left is looking at it from the side. You can see the plant and buildings and the mine tailings, and the town of Gilman, buildings of the town of Gilman are on the ridge above. On the right-hand side of the slide is, again, the Iron Mask mine buildings, but now the picture is taken from across the gorge. And in this picture, they look much more precariously perched on the cliffs. And I'm always impressed that people could actually work in these conditions. So this is a picture of the Eagle Mill buildings. These were at the foot of the cliff on the banks of the Eagle River where the railroad tracks ran, and this is the buildings in the snow. And on the right is a picture of a trestle extension over a main wagon road taken in 1916, so fairly early on, and there's a man at the edge of the platform looking down the cliff where the wagon road is running. And this is projected to be a future mine dump. So here's a picture of the Black Iron Mine, Eagle number 2 in 1916, again looking down the slope of the gorge towards the Eagle River. And when you look at these mines and the mine dumps, there is a lot of material that's going down the side of the cliff face towards the Eagle River. And whenever there was a cloud burst or a rainstorm, they would have mudslides and debris flows that went down towards the mill and covered the railroad tracks. So on the right side here, you see one of the mudslides in the town of Belden in 1916, and there's some people preparing to dig out. And if you look in the middle ground, there are two rectangular cars or boxes, and these are railroad cars that have been half buried by the resulting debris flow, and they're working on digging out the railroad tracks and these cars. So here's some people working in the mine and mill, working conditions. This is a miner loading zinc concentrates and then men panning zinc concentrates at the Gilman mill. Okay, on the left we have a miner holding a mine lamp and with his hand around his dog looking at a flood breakout in the Newhouse Tunnel of the Iron Mask mine, where water is now flooding this portion of the mine. On the right, we've got miners posed next to a runaway ore car. Obviously, the cart has stopped, but this is in the Newhouse Tunnel, and before it stopped, it crashed through the siding and tipped over partially. Here are a couple more pictures underground. The first of a man car loaded with men going along the tunnel, and the second of a miner operating an incline hoist in 1947. And again, a number of the photos focus on the underground and mill plant equipment as a very important part of the history of mining in the Gilman district. The Gilman collection contains a number of panorama shots, and this is one of them. This is a nice panorama shot of the town of Red Cliff somewhere between 1919 and about 1929. And it gives you a real good view of the town of Red Cliff, and there are some mines visible in the distance. And you can see details of what it was like to live in Red Cliff, right down to the chickens in the yard of the house in the foreground. So these are some photographs of the town of Gilman. On the left, you can see the rows of company housing built along the slope high above the gorge of the Eagle River, and get some idea what it was like to live in Gilman at that time. These are kind of iconic images. You can see these rows of houses in many of the photos in the Gilman collection. On the right is just a picture of the old post office building in 1948. It had been abandoned and it was waiting to be torn down. There's some people in Gilman, a group of men in front of a building around 1918, including a guy in a three-piece suit and engineer boots, and a woman with a very elaborate, very luxurious muff and her dog. So this is another panorama shot, and I think this is probably my favorite picture of the townsfolk of Gilman. This is the 1918 Labor Day picnic where people gathered on this meadow and celebrated Labor Day. And I put a call out of the center part of the photo. I blew it up here because the people in the middle are kids, and they're having a sack race. Everyone's watching them, cheering them along the sidelines. The men are dressed in their suits. The women are dressed in their nice hats and dresses. And it's a wonderful image. So I had to put this in because there were several pictures of train wrecks in this collection, and the one on the left is the train wreck in nearby Rock Creek Canyon leading down to the Eagle River. But they weren't, it wasn't a mining train, they were carrying ice from the mountains, and major train wreck. The one on the right is a derailed train near Belden where the engine, the locomotive, actually ran off the tracks. I thought it was interesting that it kind of conveys the difficulties of transportation and moving around in that. So, a little bit about use and impacts. Again, our intent is to make these available worldwide, which we're doing by posting them on the institutional repository as openly accessible materials. We want everyone to see and enjoy these photos. We encourage reuse of the photos, whether it's for personal use or other non-commercial use. We support accessibility for people who can't travel to the Colorado School of Mines, to our archives, to look at the physical items, and also for those who have barriers to accessibility that would find it easier to, for example, download the photo or enhance it in some way to get the most out of it. We want people to engage in education and research. We've had museums that have asked if they could use our photos in their educational displays. We've had people asked for photos to be put in their research articles or books that they're doing on the history of mining. And we really just are trying to feed people's curiosity. We want people to be able to look at these images and imagine what it was like to work there or live in that area, and just get some idea of how mining helped build this country. So in terms of impacts, in addition to the feedback we get from our users, our repository actually provides information on the number of views of the photos in the collections. So the Colorado Mining Association was one of our collections that we highlighted in part one, and they had in about a year, they came up in 2019 in December. Since then, they've had over 38,000 views. The Gilman Photos collection, which was the focus of this part two, was put up for accessible use in October 2020, so barely a month, and in that time it had over 2,800 views, and we're very happy to see this. We have created online web guides for both collections, the CMA photos and the Gilman photos. This is their address. You can also Google them. There is additional information about the collections on each of these sites, as well as a short slideshow. And our content is accessible in Mountain Scholar, and there's the address there. And you can come and browse our collections virtually, and we hope that you do. Well, that's the end of part 2 of our digital image collections focusing on the Colorado Mining Association photos and the Gilman photos. And I want to thank you for watching.